life is just tough. You know, I don't know how your week's been, but for us, man, it's been a long week. I mean, like I said, not only has the worship team put in a lot of hours, but our Stevens ministers, our volunteers, our administrative staff, a lot of you have stepped up in a lot of ways, our food prep teams, everything. It's just been a very, very long but awesome week of ministry. But the reality is that life is always hard. I mean, that is the reality of life. If you want mountaintop experiences, you got to start off in the valley, right? Like, you and I have moments of joy, and we have moments of success, and we have moments of triumph, but they often come after a season of hardship. And so the message this week is entitled, Be Strong and Courageous. Because I just feel like I want to pause for a minute and remind us of a couple of simple truths and encourage us to be strong and courageous. Throughout my life, I've had some incredible opportunities to experience some pretty amazing scenery. A few years ago, well, gosh, it's been more than a few years ago now. It's been almost 15 years ago. My wife and I had a opportunity to go to Glacier National Park, and we were hiking through, and we hiked to a particular summit that overlooks the Grinnell Glacier and the rivers and the lakes that go beyond. And you could see, I mean, just as far as you could see. I mean, you're thousands and thousands of feet in the air, and it was absolutely breathtaking. But it was about partway through a 22-and-a-half-mile day. We started at about 7 in the morning and finished at 11 o'clock that night. And just a little spur trail to get up to the top of that overlook, we did over 1,000 feet of elevation gain in less than a mile. But it was breathtaking. I've had the privilege of watching the sunset across the desert in Kenya, but not after a long day of hiking in 115-degree heat. Now, they say it's a dry heat, but that doesn't matter. It's like walking into a hairdryer. I've stood at the base of incredible waterfalls. I've stood on top of Angel's Landing in the middle of Zion National Park. But the one thing that all of those have in common is I couldn't drive there. I couldn't just simply pull up and get out of my car and take 3 steps. To really truly see those hidden treasures and those incredible moments, I had to leave the parking lot. But the hard part about being in the parking lot is you can't see the horizon for the hills around you. It's not until you climb to the top of that mountain, it's not until you walk through that forest that you get the benefit of the reward. I figured this out fairly early on in my outdoor adventure career, and we do these 5-week adventure camps, and each day the activities kind of build on themselves, and day 4 focuses on taking the kids on a hike. Now, I know that particular day they're going to wind up at the base of this amazing waterfall. It's actually 3 waterfalls on top of each other. It forms like this really awesome swimming hole. They can jump off of one into another. They can slide down. It's an incredible, incredible experience for them. But it's not an easy hike. It's a pretty difficult hike to get out to it, and then there's a series of like down climbs that you have to do using some ropes. I mean, it's not an easy thing to get to, but it sure is worth it. And most of the kids that we would take on these trips back when we first started were inner city kids who had 0 outdoor experience. Most of them showed up on Monday not even sure they wanted to be there. But by Thursday, we had gained a little bit of their trust and a little bit of their confidence. And so we start to hike out. Now again, this is not an easy hike, so often what would happen is we would get, half to 3/4 of the way out there, and it wouldn't take but one or two kids to go, I'm tired, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore, and they just quit. And then all of a sudden, all the morale starts to dwindle, and there's, near mutiny about to happen right there on the trail. We're not going any further. I mean, I've had kids just sit down in the middle of the trail and refuse to get up and walk. And so I started trying to come up with a teachable moment that would allow them to be encouraged and strengthened through this process. And so I began to ask them a question. I was like, hey, where do you think we're going, first and foremost? And they would give me some idea. I don't know, maybe we're hiking out to a view or an overlook or something like that. Maybe some of them even heard a rumor about a waterfall or something like that. And I would ask them, I said, well, why are you, if you don't know where you're going, why are you following me? Now, that made a lot of sense when I first started asking the question, because keep in mind that when we first started doing this, Bobby and I were by far the minorities. And it wasn't uncommon for Bobby and I to take 10 African-American boys out into the woods, and so you had to ask that question going, why did 10 African-American boys follow 2 white dudes out into the woods where they had no idea where they were at or where they were going, right? And I would make that obvious statement. I'm going, listen, why did you follow me out here? And eventually one of them would go, well, you've been here before. You know where we're going. And then I would ask them, do you believe that whatever is based on everything that you've gotten to do this week so far, do you believe that what's at the end of this trail is going to be amazing? And they would do, yeah. And I would get their buy-in, and we would get up, and by the time the day was over, I'm not kidding you, I can't tell you the number of times that I would have these tough, hardened kids in tears just talking about how never in their life did they think they would get to experience something like this. So I want to share a story with you today and make a parallel. It comes from the book of Deuteronomy. Give you a little bit of backstory about the book of Deuteronomy and some things leading up to this particular moment. So the book of Deuteronomy is in the Old Testament. It's the 5th book of the Old Testament. It's the last book of the Torah. God has been, through this process, has been revealing himself to the children of Israel. So it's a pivotal moment in the history of the story of God. He has chosen a people. He has set them apart. He has rescued them. He has brought them out of captivity. And he is trying to reveal to them that he is the one true God. And that he is trying to prove to them that he has established a covenant, a promise that he will be their God and they will be his people. And he also wants to reveal to them what living a life of worship and obedience will look like. And then the book ends and it leaves the rest of the story open. Now, when we get to the end of Deuteronomy, there's a couple of things that are happening here. Keep in mind that Moses has been leading the people this entire time. He was the one that led them out of captivity. He's been leading them for 40 years. They have seen all kinds of miraculous provisions and protection. They've experienced justice and discipline. They are on the cusp of entering the promised land that was prophesied about and that they've been walking towards. So this is the culmination of a really, really long story that has taken hundreds of years to get to this point. And Moses, the one that's been leading them, is coming to the end of his life, and he will not be the one that takes them into this promised land. It'll be Joshua that takes them forward. And so Moses is going to encourage Joshua. He's going to speak a blessing over him and all of Israel. And so if you've got a Bible, you can turn with me to Deuteronomy 31, verses 7 and 8. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of all of Israel, "Be strong and courageous, for you must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance." And then he says, "The Lord himself goes before you, will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." I want to spend just a minute unpacking a couple things in that last verse. So again, Moses has called Joshua forward. He is handing the mantle or the baton off to him, and he is saying, "You are the one that are going to lead the people. It is going to be you. I will not be going." After 40 years of leading you, after hundreds of years of hearing about this moment, I will not be going. It will be you, Joshua. You will be carrying this forward. It will be you that take the people. It will be you that help them divide up the land. Be strong and courageous. And then he reminds him of 4 things. The first, he says, God will go before you. He's reminding the people of the power of God. See, the people that inhabited the promised land, they didn't want the children of Israel there. They weren't interested in having company. They weren't interested in just willfully handing over the land. They were going to be an occupied people, if not a defeated and destroyed people. Which meant that the Israelites, when they went into this land, were going to have to fight an entrenched people with walled cities. Now, this was not God's first rodeo. He had already proven himself faithful to go before them. He revealed that promise and that ability in the pillar of fire and smoke, column of smoke that went before them earlier in the Exodus. So listen, I don't know what kind of struggles or what kind of valley you're coming out of, but I want you to know that God's already gone into your situation. He's already ahead of you. His promise, His goodness, His faithfulness, His sovereignty precedes the work that you and I do. We are called to follow Him. We are called to be His people. We are called to be His hands and feet to go and make disciples. But He, in every story we see, God is already in the next chapter, working everything out. God is powerful. Next, he said, God will be with you. God is faithful. See, the reason that I felt comfortable taking those kids out to that swimming hole is because I had already gone before them. Before we ever start doing any programming that we do, no matter where it's at, we don't ever just like pick a spot on a map and go, okay, let's just take a bunch of kids there and see how this works out. I had heard about this swimming hole. I'd heard about the trail and everything. I had done some research, found out the location of the trailhead. I had gone and visited, got some maps. I had taken some GPS coordinates. I had already hiked the trail, found the swimming hole. I had figured out what ropes that we needed to use to get down to it. I had done all of that before I took them. And then I find myself on the trail with them. I didn't just get up to the trailhead and say, hey, here's a map, here's a compass, good luck. I went with them. God is faithful. See, Joshua had really big shoes that he needed to fill. Again, Moses had been leading these people for 40 years. They were about to enter the land that their ancestors had been promised and that they had been walking towards. God had been faithful to guide and instruct them every step of the way. Earlier in Exodus, God had reminded them, I will be with you. When we do rock climbing, we use a series of ropes and a system called a belay system. It's just a little device that you put the rope through that creates friction and tension on the rope that allows the belayer, who's grounded and anchored, to be able to take up slack or let out slack as the climber needs it. But it also arrests their fall in the event that they lose their grip. Now, when we went out here to this swimming hole, there was this cliff that they basically had to rappel down. And so we set up there was already some ropes there, and we would set up a system that would allow us to kind of shimmy down the rope behind them so that if they lost their grip and began to fall, we could arrest their fall, get them down to the bottom, and then go back up and get the next person. And we do this because we don't want somebody to fall and get hurt, so we're with them. God is with you. The next thing he says is God will not leave you. It's one thing to go ahead of them, figure out where they're going to go, take them there, start walking the trail, get them to the spot, and then go, all right, I'm going to hike on back to the van, hope you make your way back. That's not how that works. I don't leave them there. Every time there was trouble, the Israelites assumed by their actions and even oftentimes their words that God was going to leave them. He was going to abandon them. Even though they had clear signs that was not the case. They had the Passover. And yet they grumbled at the edge of the sea. He parted the sea and they grumbled because they were hungry. He gave them fresh manna from heaven. They grumbled that they were thirsty. He gave them water from a rock. But he never, ever left them. So Moses is reminding the people of God's love for them. That unconditional love that a father has for his children. And then lastly, he reminds them that he will not forsake you. That God is committed to them. Forsake means to abandon or renounce or give up on. Even while Moses was up on the mountain receiving the 10 Commandments, the children of Israel built a false idol that they could worship, a false god. I mean, think about that. God's about to give them the law, the 10 Commandments, all this stuff. He's going to speak to Moses, and they get bored. They get tired of waiting, and so they make a false god for them to worship. And yet God was still faithful. He didn't forsake them. He continued to prove his commitment. I think about the word adoption. I was adopted when I was about 2 years old. And so oftentimes the scripture uses the word how we are adopted into the family. See, one of the things I love about adoption that I can relate to is, first of all, it's a legally binding contract. And it's a contract that the parent enters into by choice, not the child. And God has adopted you and I, by choice. And his word is binding. As the band comes up, I want to close with a couple of thoughts. If I'm being completely honest, the Sunday before Walter passed was a pretty discouraging day. I can say with all honesty that this house contended for our brother. We prayed, we fasted, we brought the elders in, we anointed with oil, we brought in prayer ministries, we marched around his house in prayer. I mean, like the effort that we put in, we did everything that the scriptures tell us to do. But it became very clear to me on that Monday that God had chosen to heal Walter by taking him home. I felt defeated. I felt discouraged. I asked, what if? Would have, should have, could have. But I was reminded of that story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego where they were so confident that God was going to save them from the fiery furnace, but then they made this disclaimer, but even if he doesn't, it won't change the truth of who God is. Yesterday we used an illustration of a baton and how we as believers, when our time comes to an end, pass the baton to the next person. And I believe that Walter was faithful to pass along his baton. But I want to encourage you with these words. I want to read verse 8 again in the Message. God is striving ahead of you. He's right here, right there with you. He won't let you down. He won't leave you. Don't be intimidated. Don't be worried. I don't know what kind of struggles you're going through. I don't know what your marriage looks like. I don't know what your family life looks like. I don't know what your job situation looks like. But I want to encourage you today. In John chapter 14, Jesus answers in his own words all four of these promises. He says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. Jesus promised in that moment of crisis, in that moment of crisis of faith that his disciples have, going, look, I'm going to go ahead of you and prepare a place so that you may be with me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well, for from now on you know him and have seen him. Jesus is reminding them, if you have seen me, I am the Father with you. I am God in flesh. I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever. I will go before you. I will be with you. I will never leave you. I will not leave you as orphans. I will come for you. I will not forsake you. All you got to do is turn on the TV and it sure looks like things are out of control. We've got political issues that have been weaponized into social issues. We've got social issues that have been weaponized into political issues. We've got economic crisis. We've got wars. We've got rumors of wars. We've got slavery. We've got hunger. We've got thirst. We've got disease. But we've also got a promise. We've got a Savior that is faithful. So, church, I encourage you to be strong and courageous, because we are the bride of Christ, and we have a promise that can never be taken away. And God promises to go before us and to be with us and not to leave us and not to forsake us.